The autumn sunlight filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 30-story banking tower, casting long shadows across marble floors I'd walked for 27 years. My fingers traced the edge of my security badge one last time. Tomorrow, it would be deactivated, and I'd finally be free. But as I entered the executive conference room that morning, their faces told a different story. The termination letter was already printed, waiting on the mahogany table like a coiled snake. They thought they were stealing my retirement. They had no idea they were pulling the pin on a grenade I'd buried deep in their digital foundations decades ago. My name is Amelia Hart. And for 27 years, I was the invisible spine holding Whitestone Capital together. That morning, I arrived at the tower at 7:45 a.m., 15 minutes early as always. The lobby security guard, Marcus, gave me his usual nod, though today his eyes darted away too quickly. The receptionist fumbled with her coffee cup when she saw me. Even the elevator seemed to hesitate before opening its doors. I should have known then. My office on the 28th floor had already been stripped of personal items. Not by me. I'd planned to pack them after the farewell lunch that was supposedly scheduled for noon. The spider plant I'd nurtured for 15 years was gone. The framed photograph of my daughter's graduation vanished. Only the company-issued laptop remained, its screen dark and accusing. Mizuar! Nathan Cross stood in my doorway, all 38 years of him wrapped in a $3,000 suit that couldn't hide his discomfort. He'd been CEO for exactly 13 months, young enough to be my son, ambitious enough to mistake ruthlessness for leadership. His perfectly styled hair caught the morning light as he stepped inside, closing the door with deliberate softness. Nathan, I didn't stand. After nearly 3 decades of building their digital empire, I'd earned the right to remain seated. He placed a cream-colored envelope on my desk, his manicured fingers pushing it toward me like a chess piece. I'm afraid we need to discuss some organizational changes. The letter was brief, clinical. Effective immediately. Strategic restructuring, position eliminated, thank you for your service. 27 years condensed into 3 paragraphs of corporate doublespeak. The final insult was the signature, not even Nathan's own hand, but a digital stamp from Human Resources. This is interesting timing, I said, folding the letter with precise creases. 24 hours before my retirement, before my full pension vests, before the stock options mature. Nathan's jaw tightened. The board made this decision based on forward-looking strategic needs. We're bringing in younger talent, people who understand modern architecture, cloud-native systems. The systems I designed are processing $3 billion in transactions every day. My voice remained steady, professional. I'd learned long ago that rage was a luxury I couldn't afford in rooms like this. The security protocols I implemented have prevented 14 major breach attempts in the last year alone. Your contributions have been noted. He straightened his tie, a nervous tell he probably didn't know he had. Security will escort you out within the hour. Your access has already been revoked. I pulled up my laptop, fingers dancing across the keyboard one last time. You mean this access? The screen flickered to life, showing the administrative panel of Aegis Core, the heart of Whitestone's entire operation. Nathan's eyes widened. Interesting. Seems to still recognize me. That should have been disabled. He pulled out his phone, probably to call ET. Should have been. I closed the laptop with a soft click. You know, Nathan, when I built Aegis Core, I made sure it would recognize its architect. Always. It's rather loyal that way. 2 security guards appeared in the doorway. Kids, really. Probably making $15 an hour to escort out someone who generated billions in secure transactions for this company. I stood, smoothing my skirt, and picked up my laptop. I'll need to return this to IT personally. Company policy, sensitive data protocols I wrote myself. Actually, leave it on the desk. Nathan's voice carried an edge now. Security will handle it. I set it down gently, my fingers lingering on the warm metal for just a moment. 27 years of code, of late nights debugging, of building something from nothing, all reduced to a piece of hardware to be wiped clean and reassigned. As the guards flanked me, I turned to Nathan one last time. You might want to have your IT team double-check that my access is fully revoked. All of it. Every system, every protocol, every backdoor. Though I doubt they'll even know where to look. His face paled slightly. Is that a threat? It's architectural advice. I smiled, the kind of smile I'd perfected in countless board meetings where men half my age explained my own systems to me. After all, you're bringing in younger talent. I'm sure they'll figure it out. The walk to the elevator felt endless. Colleagues I'd worked with for decades suddenly found their screens fascinating. The guards' badges clinked with each step, a metallic countdown to my unceremonious exit. As the elevator descended, I watched the floor numbers tick down, 28, 27, 26. Each one a year I'd given to this place. In the lobby, Marcus wouldn't meet my eyes as I handed over my badge. The magnetic strip was still warm from my touch. 29 minutes, I whispered to myself as I pushed through the revolving doors into the morning sun. Let's see how long it takes them to realize what they've just done. I remember the beginning, like it was yesterday. 1997, Whitestone Capital was just another regional bank with big ambitions and obsolete systems. They hired me straight from MIT. One of 3 women in a department of 47 programmers. Back then, the bank ran on COBOL systems held together by prayer and duct tape. Transaction processing took minutes. Security was a 4-digit PIN and a smile. They gave me a cubicle in the basement, fluorescent lights that hummed like angry wasps, and a mandate: make us competitive. So I did. While my colleagues debated protocols in endless meetings, I coded. While they played political games for promotions, I built Aegis Core from scratch, a revolutionary architecture that could process thousands of transactions per second with military-grade encryption. The first version went live in 2001. Suddenly, Whitestone could compete with the big players. The board called it a miracle. The CEO at the time, Richard Whitestone himself, called me the architect of our future. The promotion to senior systems architect came with a corner office and promises of partnership in the bank's growth. But promises, I learned, are just words that haven't been broken yet. The first crack appeared in 2009. During a routine security audit, I discovered anomalies in transaction patterns, small amounts, barely noticeable, flowing through offshore accounts in patterns that screamed money laundering. The amounts were clever, just under reporting thresholds, but the pattern was clear to anyone who knew where to look. And I knew every corner of Aegis Core. I documented everything: transaction IDs, account numbers, the algorithmic signatures of systematic laundering. The evidence filled 3 encrypted drives. I scheduled a meeting with the board, confident they'd want to address this immediately. The meeting lasted exactly 12 minutes. You're mistaken, Richard Whitestone had said, his fingers drumming on the mahogany table. These are legitimate investment vehicles, complex, yes, but entirely legal. The patterns indicate nothing. His son, James Whitestone, leaned forward. He was being groomed to take over, all Harvard MBA and no moral compass. Your job is to maintain the systems, not play detective. They offered me a choice that wasn't really a choice: forget what I'd seen and receive a substantial bonus, or pursue the matter and find myself explaining to future employers why I'd been terminated for exceeding authorized access to bank systems. Systems I had built. I took the bonus. I needed the job. Had a daughter starting college, a mortgage like everyone else, but I also kept the drives. And I started building something else. A fail-safe buried so deep in Aegis Core's architecture that it became part of its DNA. They marginalized me after that. No more strategic meetings, no more architectural decisions. They brought in consultants who recommended changes I knew would create vulnerabilities. And when I objected, they cited my resistance to innovation. They hired James's fraternity brothers as digital transformation officers, who couldn't write a line of code if their trust funds depended on it. But they couldn't get rid of me. Not entirely. Because Aegis Core was too complex, too intricate for anyone else to fully understand. They tried, bringing in teams from Accenture, Deloitte, even poaching senior engineers from Goldman Sachs. Each one looked at my code and quietly admitted they'd need years to fully grasp its architecture. So I became a ghost in my own creation. They'd trot me out when systems failed, when security patches were needed, when the occasional federal audit required someone who actually understood the architecture. The rest of the time, I was invisible, the aging woman in the corner office who refused to retire. The funny thing about being invisible is that people forget you're there. They discuss things in hallways, forward emails without checking the CC list, leave documents on shared drives. I watched as they cut corners on security to boost quarterly profits. I documented when they ignored critical updates to save money. I archived every email where they dismissed my warnings about system vulnerabilities. And through it all, I refined my failsafe. What started as insurance became something more elegant. A dead man's switch woven into every authentication protocol, every transaction pathway, every critical subroutine. I called it Sentinel Lock. And its beauty was in its simplicity. As long as I remained a legitimate user with proper retirement protocols followed, it would stay dormant. But if someone tried to force me out, to steal what I'd earned through decades of service, Sentinel would assume the system was compromised. It would protect Aegis Core the only way it knew how, by locking everyone out until proper authorization could be restored. Authorization that could only come from someone who no longer existed in the system. An employee terminated without cause before their documented retirement date. The irony was delicious. They'd spent years trying to push me out while simultaneously depending on my expertise. They wanted me gone but needed what I knew. And in their arrogance, they never once asked the right question. What happens to a system when you remove its architect? Yesterday, they thought they'd finally solved their Amelia Hart problem. Today, they were about to learn that I wasn't a problem to be solved. I was the solution they'd just thrown away. The creation of Sentinel Lock began in 2010, the morning after they buried my money laundering report. I sat in my office, watching rain streak down the windows, and made a decision. If they wanted to play games with ethics, I'd build myself an insurance policy. It started small, just a few lines of code in the authentication module. A digital signature that verified my presence in the system. Nothing malicious, nothing that would harm operations. Think of it as a heartbeat monitor, checking that the architect was still part of the architecture. Every system I touched, every update I pushed, carried this signature deeper into Aegis Core's DNA. By 2015, Sentinel had evolved into something more sophisticated. I'd integrated it into the kernel itself, the foundational code that everything else built upon. It was beautiful in its invisibility. IT audits passed over it because it appeared as standard security protocol. External consultants missed it because it was documented as legacy architect verification, boring enough that no one questioned it, critical enough that no one dared remove it. The genius was in the trigger mechanism. Sentinel didn't care if I was on vacation, on sick leave, or even on extended sabbatical. It only cared about one thing. Was my departure legitimate? The parameters were specific: voluntary retirement with full benefits, termination for documented cause with due process, or natural expiration of contract. Anything else would be interpreted as a potential security breach. I documented everything, but not where they'd look. The full technical specifications lived in a folder labeled Deprecated Y2K Compliance Protocols. 37,000 pages of mind-numbing documentation that no ambitious young developer would ever voluntarily open. Hidden in subsection 47B, between obsolete COBOL conversion tables and defunct Millennium bug patches, lay the complete blueprint of Sentinel Lock. The ethical framework was crucial. This wasn't about revenge or destruction. Sentinel was designed to protect the integrity of the system from bad actors, even if those actors happened to be wearing Armani suits and sitting in boardrooms. If someone could arbitrarily remove the system's architect without cause, what else might they do? What other critical security protocols might they override for convenience or profit? I embedded a philosophy into code, accountability through architecture. The lock itself was elegant. When triggered, Sentinel wouldn't destroy anything. I'm not a monster. Instead, it would simply require architect-level authorization for every single transaction, every database query, every user login. The catch? Architect-level authorization could only come from an active employee with the proper credentials. By firing me without cause, they'd created a paradox. The system required authorization from someone they'd just removed from the system. Over the years, I'd had opportunities to disable it. Moments of doubt when I wondered if I was being paranoid. If maybe the company had learned from its mistakes. But then James Whitestone became CEO after his father's retirement in 2018, and the culture shifted from questionable to toxic. They brought in Nathan Cross as CFO, a man who looked at employees as numbers on a spreadsheet to be optimized. I watched them lay off senior developers 2 years before their pensions vested. I saw them outsource critical security functions to the lowest bidder. I documented when they ignored my warnings about vulnerabilities in our mobile banking platform, vulnerabilities that hackers exploited 3 months later, though the breach was quietly contained and never reported to regulators. Each transgression strengthened my resolve. Sentinel Lock wasn't just protecting me anymore, it was protecting the integrity of the system I'd built. The customers who trusted their money to our digital vaults. The employees who didn't have the luxury of building their own insurance policies. The final update came 6 months ago. I'd noticed unusual activity in my access logs. Someone had been mapping my permissions, cataloging my authorizations. They were preparing for something. So I added one last feature to Sentinel, a copyright clause. You see, when I built Aegis Core, I was careful about intellectual property. The bank owned the system, but certain optimization algorithms, certain security protocols, those were licensed from my personal LLC, a company I'd established for consulting work. It was all legal, all documented in contracts that legal had barely glanced at because they were too eager to get the systems online. The license was perpetual as long as I remained an employee in good standing. The moment I was terminated without cause, those licenses would revert. Sentinel Lock wasn't just a security measure, it was a legal kill switch. They could try to break the lock, but doing so would violate intellectual property law. They could try to reverse engineer it, but that would take months, maybe years. I tested it one last time a week ago, running simulations on my personal development server. The lock engaged in 17 milliseconds. Disengagement without proper authorization would require rebuilding approximately 60% of the core architecture. Estimated downtime, 6 to 9 months. Estimated cost, $300 million in lost transactions, customer compensation, and emergency consulting fees. I closed my laptop that night knowing I'd created something unprecedented, a security system that protected against the very people who'd commissioned it. Tomorrow was supposed to be my last day, a quiet retirement with full benefits. They thought they were being clever, firing me a day early. They had no idea they'd just armed a weapon I'd spent 13 years perfecting. Sentinel Lock was about to introduce them to the concept of consequences. I walked out of Whitestone Capital at 8:47 a.m. By 9:16 a.m., Sentinel Lock had begun its work. The security guard who'd escorted me out probably didn't notice his badge reader flashing red an extra second when he returned to his post. The IT technician wiping my workstation didn't realize the admin console was cycling through an unusual authentication loop. These were whispers, Sentinel stretching its digital muscles, verifying that, yes, the architect was truly gone. At 9:23 a.m., the first branch manager in Chicago called the help desk. The system's asking for additional authorization on routine transfers, some kind of architect verification required message. At 9:31 a.m., Denver reported ATMs displaying authorization timeout errors. Customers could check balances but couldn't withdraw cash. At 9:38 a.m., the mobile banking app started failing login attempts. Not all of them. Sentinel was selective. Regular customers checking balances were fine, but high-value transactions, wire transfers, anything requiring elevated permissions hit a wall that said simply, Sentinel auth root required. I know these timestamps because I was sitting in a coffee shop 3 blocks away, watching it all unfold on my personal laptop. Not through any hack or backdoor. I was monitoring public social media. Amazing what you can learn from Twitter when a major bank starts failing. You Whitestone Bank, your app is broken. Can't transfer funds for my house closing. Why are all Whitestone ATMs in Phoenix down? What is happening? Been on hold with Whitestone Bank for 47 minutes. They keep saying, technical difficulties. This is my money. At 9:52 a.m., my phone rang. Unknown number. But I recognize the area code, Whitestone's executive floor. Hello, Amelia Hart speaking. I kept my voice pleasant, professional. Amelia, it's Nathan. We need you to come back immediately. I'm sorry, but I no longer work for Whitestone Capital. You made that quite clear this morning. Heavy breathing on the other end. What did you do? I left the building, as instructed by security. The system. He paused, probably choosing his words carefully with legal listening. The system is requesting your authorization. That's odd. You revoked my access, remember? We can restore it. Just come back and... Nathan, when you revoked my access while I was still an active employee, you triggered a security protocol. The system detected an anomaly. An architect removed without proper transition. It's protecting itself. You built this. You can fix it. I stirred my coffee slowly, letting him wait. I could have, if I were still an employee, but as of 8:47 a.m., I'm not. And Sentinel only recognizes active architect credentials. We'll rehire you, double your salary, triple it. That's generous, but it won't work. Sentinel timestamps everything. It knows I was terminated at 8:15 a.m. It knows my credentials were revoked at 8:20 a.m. If you try to restore them now, it will see that as a potential security breach, someone trying to recreate credentials that were legitimately revoked. It will lock down harder. Silence. Then, you planned this. I planned for the possibility that someone might try to illegally terminate me to avoid paying my pension. The system is working exactly as designed, protecting itself from bad actors. This is extortion. This is architecture. You wanted a system that couldn't be compromised, even by internal threats. Congratulations, you got it. I heard muffled voices in the background, probably legal. Maybe the board dialing in. Nathan came back on, his voice forced calm. What do you want? Nothing. I wanted to retire with the pension I earned over 27 years. That opportunity passed at 8:15 this morning. There has to be a way to unlock this. Oh, there is. You can rebuild the entire core architecture from scratch. Should only take 6 to 9 months if you hire the right team. I'd recommend starting with the authentication modules, then moving to transaction processing. You'll want to maintain parallel systems to avoid complete downtime, so factor in the cost of running duplicate infrastructure. You're destroying the bank. No, I'm retired. You destroyed the bank when you decided to steal my pension. I just built a system that recognizes theft when it sees it. At 10:15 a.m., the first news alert popped up on my phone. Technical difficulties at Whitestone Capital leave, customers unable to access funds. At 10:27 a.m., someone leaked internal communications to a financial blogger. The headline: Major bank facing complete system lockout after firing senior IT staff. At 10:34 a.m., Whitestone's stock price began its descent. My phone buzzed with another call. This time, it was James Whitestone himself. Ms. Hart, surely we can come to an arrangement. Mr. Whitestone, you had an arrangement with me. 27 years of service, ending with a proper retirement. You chose to alter that arrangement. The board is prepared to offer a significant settlement. The board should be prepared to explain to shareholders why they authorized the termination of the only person who understood their critical infrastructure. You'll face legal action, criminal charges. For what? Building a security system that works exactly as documented? Check Section 47B of the Y2K compliance protocols. It's all there. Every function, every trigger, every safeguard. Your legal team approved it in 2011, 2015, and again in 2019. Another pause? I could practically hear the lawyers scrambling through documentation. How do we fix this? You don't. I don't. Nobody does. Sentinel lock isn't broken. It's working perfectly. It detected a critical security breach when the system's architect was improperly removed, and it responded by protecting the system, just as it was designed to do. I finished my coffee and stood to leave. Oh, and James? You might want to check the licensing agreements for the optimization protocols. I believe they expired at 9 p.m. when my employment officially ended. Your lawyers should find that interesting reading. The phone was ringing again as I walked out into the morning sun. 29 minutes had become 2 hours, and Whitestone Capital was learning what happens when you pull the foundation from under your own house. By noon, Whitestone Capital's headquarters had transformed into a war room. I wasn't there, of course, but I didn't need to be. 27 years in that building meant I knew exactly how they'd react to crisis. Conference Room 30A would be commandeered, coffee would be ordered in bulk, and Nathan Cross would be pacing while pretending to have everything under control. What I could see was the public fallout. The financial news networks had picked up the story. Breaking: Whitestone Capital experiencing nationwide system failures. Stock price down 12%. Customers flooding social media with increasingly creative descriptions of their frustration. Someone had already created a meme of an ATM displaying 404, money not found. At 12:47 p.m., my daughter Sarah called. Mom, are you watching the news? I'm aware of the situation. Did you? She paused. She knew me too well. Never mind, just be careful. At 1:15 p.m., I received an email from a Bloomberg reporter, then Reuters, then the Wall Street Journal. I didn't respond. Let Whitestone's PR team earn their retainers. Meanwhile, inside that war room, I knew the IT department was discovering the true elegance of Sentinel lock. Every attempt to bypass it triggered deeper authentication requirements. Try to force access through the database. Now the database required Sentinel authorization. Attempt to roll back to yesterday's backup. Sentinel had timestamped those too. Rolling back would just recreate the termination trigger. The young hotshots Nathan had mentioned, the ones who understood modern architecture, were probably realizing that modern didn't mean better. They were cloud-native experts trying to understand a hybrid system that predated their careers, like asking a Tesla mechanic to fix a Swiss watch. At 2:00 p.m., Nathan called again. This time, he had backup. Ms. Hart, this is Sandra Williams from the Federal Reserve. You're on speaker with representatives from the FDIC and Treasury. Interesting, they'd called in the regulators. Good afternoon, I said pleasantly. Ms. Hart, we need to understand the scope of this situation. Are customer funds at risk? Not at all. Every cent is exactly where it should be. The system is actually protecting those funds by preventing any unauthorized access or transfers. But customers can't access their money. The system is in protective mode. It detected a critical security anomaly and responded according to its programming. Customer funds are safer than they've ever been. No one can touch them. Can you fix this? I'm no longer a Whitestone employee. I have no authorization to access their systems. Nathan's voice cut in. She built a backdoor. She's holding the bank hostage. Mr. Cross, I said calmly. Please direct the regulators to Section 47B of your Y2K compliance protocol documentation. You'll find complete technical specifications for the Sentinel lock security system, including its triggers and behaviors. Your legal department has signed off on this documentation 3 times. I heard papers shuffling, keyboards clicking. Sandra Williams spoke again. Ms. Hart, this documentation is extensive. 37,000 pages. I believe in being thorough. It says here that Sentinel lock is designed to protect against unauthorized architectural modifications. Can you explain? Certainly. If someone could arbitrarily remove or modify the core architect's access without proper protocol, they could potentially compromise the entire system. Sentinel prevents this by requiring architect-level authorization for critical operations. When that architect is improperly removed, the system assumes it's under attack. And you are that architect. Was, until 8:15 this morning. More muffled discussion. Then, Mr. Cross. Why was Ms. Hart terminated one day before her retirement? Nathan's pause was audible, even over the phone. Strategic restructuring. You fired someone critical to your infrastructure for strategic restructuring 24 hours before their pension vested? No response. At 3:30 p.m., the situation escalated. Someone at Whitestone had the bright idea to try brute forcing Sentinel. Big mistake. The system interpreted this as an active attack and elevated to DEFCON 2. My little joke from the military contractors I'd worked with early in my career. Additional encryption layers activated. Transaction queues froze. Even read-only operations now required Sentinel authorization. The ATMs didn't just stop working, they displayed a message. System integrity threatened. Protective measures engaged. Twitter exploded. Whitestone down was trending. Someone leaked a photo from inside a branch. Customers lined up out the door. Tellers helplessly explaining they couldn't access any accounts. A small business owner told CNN he couldn't make payroll. A grandmother in Minnesota couldn't withdraw money for her medication. At 4 p.m., just before market close, Whitestone stock had dropped 23%, $8 billion in market value. Evaporated. James Whitestone called personally. No lawyers, no team, just him. Amelia. His voice sounded older than his 71 years. I remember when you first came to us. Young woman, brilliant mind, such promise. I remember too. You promised me a partnership in building something great. We did build something great. You built it on my shoulders, then tried to kick them out from under you. Nathan was overzealous. The board didn't know about the timing, about your retirement. I laughed, actually laughed. James, you signed the termination approval. Your signature is on the document. Silence. What do you want? He asked finally. I wanted to retire with dignity. That opportunity is gone. We could reverse the termination, backdate it to Monday, after your retirement was processed. Sentinel timestamps everything, James. You can't backdate reality. Then we're ruined. No, you're accountable. There's a difference. At 4:15 p.m., the Federal Reserve issued a statement. We are monitoring the situation at Whitestone Capital. Customer deposits remain insured and secure. Translation. The bank might fail, but the government would cover the losses. Taxpayers bailing out executive greed. Again. At 4:47 p.m., Nathan Cross was escorted from the building. My contacts? Yes, I still had contacts. Told me security had to protect him from employees who'd just learned their stock options were worthless. The young developers he'd wanted to replace me with? 3 quit that afternoon. The others were updating their LinkedIn profiles while pretending to work on solutions. By Thursday evening, day 3 of what financial media had dubbed the Whitestone freeze, the situation had evolved beyond anyone's worst projections. The bank's stock price had cratered 41%. The FDIC had set up emergency response teams. And Nathan Cross had become the most hated man in finance. Quite an achievement in that particular field. But the truly beautiful part wasn't the public catastrophe. It was what was happening in the code itself. Every attempt to bypass Sentinel lock had made things worse. Some junior developer had tried to create a parallel authentication system. Sentinel detected it as a spoofing attempt and locked down the backup servers. Another team attempted to isolate infected modules. Sentinel responded by encrypting the isolation protocols themselves. It was like watching someone try to perform surgery while the patient's immune system attacked every instrument they touched. At 7:02 p.m., I received a call from someone unexpected, Robert Henley. Whitestone's oldest board member, the only one left from when I'd first joined. Amelia, Robert here, I'm calling from my personal phone. This conversation isn't happening. Hello, Robert. I voted against it. The termination. Want that on record, even if this record doesn't exist. One vote against 7 doesn't mean much. It means something to me. He sighed. Nathan convinced them you were a liability. Said you were stuck in old thinking, that your systems were holding the bank back. James backed him because Nathan promised a 30% efficiency increase in IT spending. By firing the person who knew how everything worked. Hubris, pure hubris. A pause. They're going to try something at midnight. A full system restore from the disaster recovery site in Nevada. They think if they bring up a clean system isolated from the network, they can bypass Sentinel. I felt a smile tug at my lips. The Nevada site runs the same code base. I know, but they're desperate. The Federal Reserve is threatening to take control. The board is in full panic. There's talk of criminal investigations. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserved better. 27 years. And they threw you away to save money on a pension that would have been a rounding error in their bonuses. After Robert hung up, I opened my laptop and pulled up something I hadn't looked at in years. The original Sentinel lock documentation. Not the 37,000 pages of camouflage, but my real notes. The philosophy behind it. A system that recognizes its own violation, I'd written in 2010. Not through external monitoring, but through understanding its own integrity. When the foundation is compromised, the entire structure must protect itself, even from its owners. At 11:58 p.m., I watched from my home office as Whitestone's IT team prepared their midnight miracle. I didn't have access to their systems, but I could see the effects. The Nevada Data Center's public status page showed sudden activity spikes. They were bringing the backup system online. 12 a.m. The switchover began. 12:17 a.m. The Nevada system connected to the network. 12:19 a.m. Sentinel lock recognized its twin. 12:23 a.m. Both systems synchronized their status. 12:27 a.m. The Nevada Sentinel confirmed the New York Sentinel's assessment. Core architect improperly terminated, system integrity compromised. 12:31 a.m. Both systems elevated to DEFCON 1. The beauty of distributed architecture is that it's resilient. The curse is that it's consistently resilient, even against the people trying to fix it. My phone exploded with calls. I turned it off and made tea. Friday morning brought apocalypse. Every single Whitestone system was now in full lockdown. Not just banking operations, email, phones, even the key card door systems. The building itself had effectively evicted its occupants. Employees stood on the sidewalk, badges useless, watching their workplace reject them. The fed-up customers had started a run on the bank, but there was nothing to run to. You can't withdraw money from a system that won't acknowledge you exist. The FDIC had to issue emergency statements assuring people their money existed, even if they couldn't touch it. At 9 a.m., an FBI agent knocked on my door. Ms. Hart, Agent Martinez, we need to discuss the situation at Whitestone Capital. I invited him in, offered coffee. He was younger than Sarah, trying to look stern but mainly looking exhausted. Ms. Hart, did you intentionally sabotage Whitestone's systems? No. I built security protocols that functioned exactly as designed and documented. Protocols that are currently preventing millions of people from accessing their money. Protocols that are protecting those people's money from a system that's been compromised. Compromised by what? Bad decision-making, unethical behavior, treating critical infrastructure as a cost center to be optimized rather than the foundation of the entire operation. He pulled out a tablet, showed me screenshots of code. Our analysts say this Sentinel lock system is extraordinarily sophisticated. They also say it appears designed to trigger under very specific circumstances. Yes, improper termination of the core architect. That's very convenient for you. It's very logical for system security. If someone can arbitrarily remove the person who understands the system best, what else might they do? What other critical decisions might they make without understanding the consequences? The board claims you held this information hostage, that you never properly documented Sentinel Lock. I stood, walked to my bookshelf, and pulled out a bound copy of Section 47B, all 2,000 pages of it, dropped it on the coffee table with a satisfying thud. Full documentation, filed with Whitestone's Compliance Department in 2011, 2013, 2015, 2017, and 2019, each time signed off by legal, IT leadership, and the board's technology committee. Agent Martinez flipped through pages, his eyes widening. This is complete, comprehensive, and completely ignored because no one wanted to read 2,000 pages of technical documentation hidden in deprecated Y2K protocols. Can you fix this? No, even if I wanted to. Sentinel won't recognize me anymore. I'm not an employee. My credentials were revoked. The system is protecting itself from everyone now, including me. Then Whitestone is finished. I sipped my coffee. Or reborn. They can rebuild from scratch. Hire competent architects. Pay their employees fairly. Honor their contracts. It'll cost hundreds of millions and take months. But they can do it. You're remarkably calm about destroying a major financial institution. I didn't destroy anything. I built something indestructible. They destroyed themselves trying to steal from the person who knew where all the load-bearing walls were. By Friday afternoon, the Whitestone Board of Directors convened an emergency meeting that would determine the bank's fate. I wasn't there. But Rebecca Chen from IT, one of the few competent people they'd hired in recent years, texted me updates. She'd been one of the developers smart enough to actually read my documentation, though she'd never admitted it to management. They're in full panic, she wrote. Nathan's been terminated. James Whitestone just announced his resignation. The board had finally done what they should have done years ago, cleaned house, but it was too late. You can't unring a bell, and Sentinel Lock had already heard the chimes. At 3:00 p.m., a new player entered the scene, Marcus Webb, the crisis management specialist who'd saved 3 banks from collapse in 2008. He called me directly. Ms. Hart, I've been brought in to resolve this situation. I've spent the last 6 hours reviewing your documentation. This Sentinel Lock, it's brilliant. Thank you. I mean it. It's the most elegant security architecture I've ever seen. It's also currently destroying my client. Your client destroyed themselves. I'm not disagreeing, but right now, we need solutions, not philosophy. The solution is simple: rebuild from scratch. That'll take months. The bank won't survive weeks. Then perhaps it shouldn't survive. He paused. You know what the real irony is? The board wants to hire you back as a consultant. They're offering $10 million for 6 months of work to help rebuild. I laughed. Actually laughed. 6 months ago, they could have kept me for the cost of a pension. Now they want to pay $10 million to get back what they threw away for free? The market loves poetic justice. Will you consider it? No. 20 million. Mr. Webb, they could offer me the entire bank. The answer would still be no. Not because I'm vindictive, but because it's impossible. Sentinel Lock has a specific legal trigger. Check subsection 47B, paragraph 2847. I heard pages turning. The copyright clause, he said slowly. Exactly. When I was terminated without cause, the licenses for several core optimization algorithms reverted to my LLC. Those algorithms are integrated so deeply into Aegis Core that removing them would be like trying to remove flour from a baked cake. So even if we rebuilt, you'd be violating intellectual property law the moment you activated any system that uses my algorithms, which is all of them. You've created a perfect trap. I created perfect protection. They trapped themselves. At 4:30 p.m., someone leaked the full story to the Wall Street Journal. The headline was brutal. Whitestone's $50 pension grab costs bank $15 billion in market value. The details were worse. They'd found the email trail, Nathan proposing the termination, James supporting it, the board voting 7-1 in favor. They'd calculated that firing me 1 day early would save the bank $2.3 million in pension obligations. Current losses, $15 billion, and climbing. At 5 p.m., the Federal Reserve announced they were taking emergency control of Whitestone Capital. The bank was effectively nationalized, the first major bank failure since 2008. Customers would be protected, but shareholders were wiped out. The board members who'd voted for my termination saw their personal holdings, hundreds of millions in stock, become worthless. That evening, I received an unexpected visitor, James Whitestone himself, looking like he'd aged a decade in 3 days. "May I come in?" I let him sit in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd worked countless late nights on Whitestone projects, solving problems that made him millions. "I wanted to apologize," he said. "For what specifically? Firing me, stealing my pension, or destroying your family's bank?" "All of it. But mostly for forgetting what you taught me." "I never taught you anything. James, you never listened. You taught by example. Every line of code, every system design, it all had integrity. It all had purpose. We lost that. I lost that. You traded it for efficiency metrics and cost savings that looked good in PowerPoint presentations." He nodded, looking at his hands. "My grandfather founded Whitestone in 1923. 97 years of history, destroyed in 72 hours. No. James. Destroyed in the moment you decided to steal from someone who'd given you everything. The 72 hours was just how long it took for the consequences to arrive. Can you ever forgive me? Forgiveness is irrelevant. What matters is what happens next. The Fed will break up the bank, sell the pieces. The Whitestone name will disappear. Names are just labels. The real question is whether anyone will learn from this." He stood to leave, then turned back. "The young developers, the ones Nathan wanted to replace you with, they're calling you a hero. They're saying you struck a blow for every engineer who's ever been undervalued, underpaid, or discarded. I'm not a hero. I'm just an architect who built a house that couldn't be stolen." After he left, I sat in my quiet kitchen, thinking about Monday morning. For the first time in 27 years, I wouldn't be thinking about Whitestone's systems, their problems, their vulnerabilities. The news was calling it the revenge of the architect. But they were wrong. It wasn't revenge, it was retirement, exactly as I'd planned it. 6 months later, I stood in a lecture hall at MIT, my alma mater, speaking to a room full of computer science students. The invitation had come with a simple request: tell them the truth about building systems in the real world. The Whitestone collapse wasn't about revenge, I told them. It was about architecture. When you build systems, you're not just writing code, you're creating the digital infrastructure that millions depend on. That infrastructure must have integrity, not just in its code, but in its very conception. A student raised her hand. "But didn't you know Sentinel Lock would destroy them?" I knew it would protect the system. They destroyed themselves by creating the exact conditions it was designed to prevent. The professor who'd invited me, Dr. Sarah Kim, had been following the story closely. The academic world was fascinated. Dissertations were being written about Sentinel Lock, about ethical architecture, about the responsibilities of system designers. "Ms. Hart," another student asked, "what happened to the bank?" Whitestone Capital no longer exists. The Federal Reserve broke it into 5 smaller banks, each with new management, new oversight, and ironically, all running on completely rebuilt systems that will take years to reach the efficiency of what I built. And Nathan Cross? Banned from banking for life by federal regulators. Last I heard, he was teaching a business ethics course at a community college. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The real aftermath was more complex. The Whitestone protocols had become industry standard. Comprehensive documentation requirements, architect protection clauses, ethical override systems. Banks now competed to retain their senior technologists. The days of treating IT as a cost center were over. My daughter Sarah had worried about legal consequences, but they never came. Every investigation reached the same conclusion. I had built exactly what I was asked to build, documented everything properly, and the system had functioned perfectly. You can't prosecute someone for competence. The copyright licenses I'd reclaimed were worth a fortune. Other banks wanted to license the optimization algorithms, the security protocols, the efficiency patterns I'd developed. But I wasn't interested in money anymore. Instead, I released them under an open-source license with one requirement. Any company using them had to guarantee their senior architects couldn't be terminated without cause in the 5 years before retirement. They called it the Heart Clause. It protected thousands of engineers approaching retirement. "What do you do now?" a student asked. "I consult, selectively. Only for companies that value their technical talent. I teach, occasionally. And I garden. There's something satisfying about building things that grow rather than things that process." After the lecture, Dr. Kim walked me to my car. "You know they're making a movie about this?" "So I've heard. They want to add a romantic subplot and make Sentinel Lock into some kind of AI. Hollywood never lets facts get in the way of drama." "You could have prevented all of this," she said quietly. A simple warning to the board about what would happen. I did warn them, in subsection 47B, paragraph 1, 8 and 23. Improper termination of core architect will result in complete system lockdown. They had the information. They chose not to read it. 2,000 pages of documentation. You knew they wouldn't read it. I knew they should have. There's a difference between can't and won't. They had the resources to understand what they were buying. They chose not to use them. Standing in that parking lot, I thought about the thousands of engineers who'd reached out since the collapse. Not to condemn or praise, but to share their own stories. Decades of dedication repaid with pink slips. Innovations that made millions while their creators were laid off to boost quarterly earnings. Critical knowledge dismissed because it came from someone deemed too old or too expensive. Was it worth it? Dr. Kim asked. Destroying a 97-year-old institution? I didn't destroy it, I revealed it. Whitestone was already rotten, corrupted by greed, short-sightedness, and the belief that people like me were disposable. Sentinel Lock just made that rot visible. And if you could do it again, I'd write even better documentation. Maybe add illustrations. Apparently, executives understand pictures better than words. That evening, I returned to my empty house, not empty of things, but empty of the constant anxiety that had filled it for years. No more 3 a.m. calls about system crashes, no more emergency patches on weekends, no more pretending to respect people who saw me as an expense to be minimized. I opened my laptop and looked at the last email James Whitestone had sent me, months after the collapse. The board meets tomorrow to discuss dissolution. We're voting on whether to recommend criminal investigations into the original termination decision. I'm voting yes. Someone should be held accountable. I never replied. Accountability isn't something you vote on. It's something you build into the system from the very beginning. The next morning's financial news carried a small item. Former Whitestone CEO Nathan Cross sentenced to 18 months minimum security for lying to federal investigators. He tried to claim he never knew about Sentinel Lock, despite 3 emails where I'd explicitly warned him about the system's protective measures. My phone rang. Another bank, another offer. "Ms. Hart, we need someone to review our core architecture. We'll pay whatever you ask." "Send me your current documentation first," I said. "All of it." That's about 50,000 pages. "Then you'd better hope it's well organized. My consulting fee is proportional to how much I have to read to understand what you've built." They'd learn, or they wouldn't. Either way, I'd build them something that couldn't be stolen, couldn't be compromised, and couldn't be ignored. Because that's what architects do. We build things that last, even when the people who commission them don't. The door is closed now, permanently. Not because I locked it, but because they never knew it was there in the first place. And somewhere in the digital ether, Sentinel Lock's ghost still whispers its warning. Architect verification required. They should have listened. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're enjoying this tale from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story of justice in the digital age resonated with you, please subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Share your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed or experienced something similar in your workplace? Your stories and perspectives make our community richer. Until next time, remember, value those who build your foundations. Because once they're gone, the door closes forever.